number 1. Never get closer than 6 feet. Break it, and you lose your chance to live. 2 patients decide to steal 1 foot and pay the price. Stella Grant was a 17-year-old girl living with cystic fibrosis, CF, a genetic disease that makes it difficult to breathe and causes thick mucus to build up in the lungs. Because of CF, Stella spent a large part of her life in hospitals. Over time, she had learned to survive by being organized and staying in control. She made detailed to-do lists, never missed her medications, and documented her life with CF on her YouTube channel. At the beginning of the movie, Stella checked into the hospital once again for a tune-up. This was a long hospital stay, meant to clear her lungs and stabilize her condition while she waited for a lung transplant. She said goodbye to her friends and family, then settled into her familiar hospital room. Her nurse, Barb, was extremely strict about rules, knowing that CF patients are fragile and highly vulnerable to infections. We were also introduced to Poe, Stella's best friend in the hospital. Like Stella, Poe had CF. He was funny, kind, loved to cook, and was openly interested in guys. Stella and Poe had known each other for years through repeated hospital stays, forming a deep bond. Even though they cared deeply about each other, they were never allowed to touch due to strict CF safety rules. CF patients can easily pass dangerous and sometimes deadly bacteria to one another. Because of this, they must remain 6 feet apart at all times. This 6-foot rule is not just a guideline, it is a matter of life and death. If Stella becomes infected with certain bacteria, she could be removed from the lung transplant list, losing her chance at a longer life. If you like emotional movie recaps where one rule changes everything, subscribe to Rule Number 1 Recaps. Now let's continue. Despite being confined to the hospital, Stella tried to maintain some sense of normalcy. She kept her spirits up by staying active and frequently visiting the newborn nursery, where she found comfort in watching new life begin. It was there, in the nursery, that Stella met another patient named Will Newman. Will had a cocky attitude and a rebellious personality, but it was clear he was immediately interested in her. Before their interaction could go any further, Nurse Barb stepped in and firmly reminded them to keep their distance. Stella soon learned that Will also had CF, but unlike her, he was infected with a highly dangerous bacteria called Burkholderia cepacia. This infection made him extremely risky to be around. If Stella were to catch it, she would immediately lose her eligibility for a lung transplant. Because of this, Nurse Barb was especially strict about keeping Will and Stella far apart at all times. One evening, Stella noticed Will sitting on the edge of the hospital rooftop through her window. Alarmed by what she saw, she rushed out to confront him, demanding to know why he would take his life so lightly by sitting on the edge of such a tall building. To Stella, who followed every rule just to stay alive, his behavior felt reckless and insulting. Will responded casually, saying his lungs were already toast and that he simply wanted to enjoy the view while he still could. Then, without warning, he pretended to fall off the edge, laughing as he did it. The joke terrified Stella and left her furious. Feeling disrespected and shaken, she stormed off and left him behind. Even after walking away, Stella couldn't shake the uneasy feeling he left behind. His attitude continued to bother her, and the anger built inside her. Eventually, she decided to confront him again. This time, she went directly to his hospital room. Inside the room, Stella looked through Will's medical chart and treatment schedule. What she found only made things worse. Will routinely skipped medications and avoided therapies, even though he was in the hospital for a clinical trial that could potentially extend his life. For Stella, who followed every rule with precision, his carelessness felt almost unforgivable. She exploded, accusing him of throwing away a life that so many CF patients would do anything to keep. Rather than getting defensive, Will seemed amused by her outburst. He was also clearly intrigued by how deeply she cared. Curious, he followed her to the nursery and asked her why his behavior affected her so strongly. Stella admitted that she had serious control issues. She explained that she needed structure and order to feel safe, and watching him ignore his treatments made her feel like everything around her was spiraling out of control. Sensing an opportunity, Will suggested a deal. He told Stella that if he let her help him stay organized with his medications and treatments, in return, he asked for one thing: permission to draw her in his sketchbook. Stella hesitated, unsure whether she should get involved with someone so reckless, but eventually she agreed to the arrangement. Not long after, Will met Poe for the first time. Poe explained that Stella was the reason he stayed consistent with his medications. He openly admitted that he loved her deeply, but because he was gay, their relationship had always been purely emotional rather than romantic. During the conversation, Will revealed something deeply personal. 8 months earlier, he had contracted Burkholderia capacia. At the time, he had been on the lung transplant list and believed he still had a future. But once the infection was discovered, that hope disappeared. His life expectancy became painfully limited. The next morning, Will received his medication cart. Shortly afterward, Stella arrived in his room and began organizing it. Poe and Will kept watch outside, making sure no nurses caught them breaking protocol. Going even further, Stella created an app that sent Will reminders for every treatment he needed to complete. Will was stunned by the effort she put in and genuinely impressed by her determination. From that point on, they began communicating constantly. Though they were separated by walls and strict distance rules, they started doing their treatments together through video calls, messages, and shared routines. Even without physical contact, a strong connection began to form between them. Later in the hospital gym, Will reminded Stella about their deal. Now that he had followed her treatment plan, it was time for her to keep her promise. After the workout, she allowed him to draw her. When he finally showed her the sketch, she realized it was a playful cartoon rather than a serious portrait. The moment was lighthearted. As Stella and Will grew closer, we began to learn more about Stella's past and the pain she carried with her. Stella once had an older sister named Abby. The two sisters had been incredibly close and shared everything with each other. But now, Abby was gone, and the memories of her brought Stella deep emotional pain. During one of their video calls, Will became curious about Abby. He heard her mention her name and gently asked about her. At first, Stella avoided the question. Talking about Abby was too painful, and she wasn't ready to open that wound. Will kept pressing, not fully understanding how sensitive the topic was. Eventually, he realized the truth. Abby was dead. Will's persistence pushed Stella too far. Overwhelmed by grief and anger, she shut him out completely. She stopped answering his messages and ignored his calls. As the emotional stress built, Stella's health began to decline, and she was forced to undergo another medical treatment. Realizing he had hurt her deeply, Will became desperate to make things right. He drew a heartfelt cartoon apology and sneaked into the area where Stella was recovering from her procedure. He sang to her and gave her a drawing related to Abby that Stella had been keeping in her room. The gesture broke through her emotional walls, and the two reconnected, understanding each other on a deeper level than before. As Will left the recovery area, Nurse Barb caught him. She had been watching Stella and Will closely and growing increasingly concerned. Barb knew how dangerous emotional attachments can be for CF patients. She explained that years earlier she had cared for another pair of CF patients who fell in love. Wanting to give them a moment of happiness, she once allowed them to break the rules and be physically close. Soon after, both patients died from infections. That decision haunted her ever since. Because of that trauma, Barb was determined not to let history repeat itself. She warned Will that the rules exist for a reason and that breaking them could cost lives. The warning deeply affected Will. He began researching Burkholderia capacia and its impact on cystic fibrosis patients. The more he read, the clearer the truth became. He realized that simply being near Stella put her life at risk. He understood that, no matter how careful they were, he could be the reason she lost her chance at survival. It became painfully obvious that Stella had fallen in love with Will, and that Will felt the same way. But instead of growing closer, Will began pulling away. He stopped responding to her messages and avoided seeing her altogether. He believed distance was the only way to keep her safe. Stella noticed the change immediately. His absence hurt more than the disease itself. She understood why the rule existed, but the emotional distance became unbearable. She wanted to be close to him. She wanted to feel his presence. Most of all, she was exhausted from living a life completely controlled by CF and its rules. Determined to take back some control and unable to accept the emotional distance any longer, Stella made a decision that changed everything. She declared a new rule of her own, 5 feet apart instead of 6. She announced this decision in a new YouTube video. At first, she spoke calmly and logically, explaining the medical dangers of Burkholderia capacia and why CF patients must follow strict protocols, constant hand sanitizing, gloves, and absolutely no physical contact. Then her tone began to change. Stella admitted she had been thinking about that 6th foot, the extra space that separated her from the people she loved. She talked about everything cystic fibrosis had already stolen from her and from so many others like her. freedom, spontaneity, the ability to have children, and often the chance to even grow up. She confessed that the disease made falling in love almost impossible. As she spoke, Stella held up a pool cue. It measured exactly 5 feet. She explained that after everything CF had taken from her, she was going to steal something back. Just 1 foot of space. She looked directly into the camera and declared, "CF, you're not the thief anymore. I'm the thief now." Stella took the pool cue to Will, and he realized this wasn't a joke or a moment of rebellion that would fade. Will was shocked by her courage and deeply moved by her willingness to risk something so important just to be closer to him. Using the pool cue as their guide, they sneaked through the hospital together and decided to go on what they called a distance date, holding each end of the stick so they could walk side by side while still maintaining their 5-foot rule. Even though they never touched, the moment felt intimate and dangerous at the same time. During their date, they talked more openly than ever before. The walls between them started to fall, and they began sharing secrets they had never said out loud. Stella finally opened up about her sister Abby. She explained that Abby had died in a tragic cliff diving accident. Stella admitted that she carried deep guilt over her sister's death. She believed that if she had been there, she might have been able to stop Abby or save her. That guilt had stayed with her ever since. Abby's death shattered Stella's family. Her parents eventually divorced and became emotionally distant, leaving Stella to cope with her grief largely on her own. Much of Stella's need for control, organization, and strict rule following came from this trauma and her fear of losing more people she loved. Will shared his own truth. He talked about how trapped he felt by his illness and by his mother's constant push for experimental treatments and drug trials. He believed that because he had dyspepsia, his life would be short no matter what he did. Instead of spending what time he had left following rules, Will dreamed of traveling and living freely, even if that meant dying younger. As their emotions surfaced, the tension between them grew stronger. Even without physical contact, their connection felt deeply intimate. Stella stood up and revealed the scars left behind by surgeries and medical treatments. Will could see the vulnerability in her, and he responded by showing her his own scars. For a brief moment, they were no longer defined by their disease. They were just two young people in love, sharing a connection that felt powerful and real. The next morning arrived with a quiet sense of warmth. That day happened to be Will's birthday. Stella, always the planner, had already been working behind the scenes to make the day special. She organized a small birthday surprise for Will inside the hospital. Poe, always eager to help, volunteered to cook for the celebration. For a brief moment, the hospital didn't feel like a place of illness or restriction. It felt almost normal. What Stella didn't know was that Poe had been quietly changing too. For some time, Stella had been helping Poe navigate his own love life. Poe was in love with a boy named Michael, but he had always been afraid to fully commit. He worried that his illness would only bring pain to someone he cared about. Stella, who understood that fear better than anyone, constantly encouraged him to be brave and follow his heart. On the day of the dinner, Poe revealed that he had been practicing his cooking because Michael was going to introduce him to his family soon. Everything between them was going well. Hearing this filled Stella with pure happiness. For once, someone she loved was moving toward a future instead of away from it. The birthday dinner began, and the mood was joyful. Stella, Will, Poe, and their friends gathered together, laughing, eating, and celebrating Will's birthday. They cheered for Will and enjoyed the rare sense of peace. But the happiness didn't last long. Nurse Barb discovered the gathering and became furious. She saw it as another dangerous violation of the rules and threatened to transfer Will to another hospital. Her reaction brought everyone back to reality. Not long after the dinner, tragedy struck. Poe suddenly collapsed in the hospital room. The staff rushed in and did everything they could to save him, but it was too late. Poe died from complications related to his cystic fibrosis. Stella was completely shattered. She had lost another person she loved to CF. Poe followed the rules. He took his medication, he stayed careful, and yet he still died. Stella was forced to confront a devastating truth. Playing it safe didn't save him. Grief overwhelmed her. She thought about Abby. She thought about all the time she and Poe were never allowed to touch or hug because of the rules. Now, he was gone forever, and that distance could never be undone. For Stella, this loss changed everything.
Consumed by grief, Stella made another decision. She told Will she wanted to see the city lights. For years, she had watched them from her hospital window, always out of reach. Now she wanted to experience them for real. even if just once. She convinced Will to sneak out of the hospital with her. Wrapped in winter coats, they walked through the snow together. Every step felt stolen. Every breath felt risky. Eventually, they reached a frozen pond, glowing under the city lights. Standing there, surrounded by snow and silence, they allowed themselves to fully live in the moment. They laughed, talked, and soaked in the beauty around them. As emotions rose, they drifted closer to each other. They almost kissed, but Will pulled away at the last second. A few minutes later, Stella's phone buzzed. The hospital was calling. New lungs were available for her transplant. Stella looked at the message and made a shocking choice. She ignored it. In that moment, she would rather have spent what might have been her final moments with Will than face another surgery that could fail. Will received a notification and immediately understood what she was doing. He begged her to go back, telling her that this was her chance to live. Stella refused. Their argument escalated as they stood on a bridge near the pond. In the heat of the moment, Stella lost her balance and fell through the ice into the freezing water below. Panic set in. Will rushed to her, fighting the cold as he pulled her out of the water. Stella was unconscious and not breathing. Will knew exactly what he had to do and exactly what it would cost. Without hesitating, he performed mouth-to-mouth CPR. This act was strictly forbidden. Will had B. Sapatia, and breathing into Stella could infect her lungs. But in that moment, Will chose her life over the rules. He saved her, even if it meant losing her forever. An ambulance rushed them back to the hospital. Both of them were shaking, coughing, and barely conscious from the freezing cold. They were placed side by side on gurneys, separated by inches they could finally no longer measure. Stella told them she didn't want the transplant anymore. Will refused to let her give up. He told her to do it for him. After everything they had been through, she finally agreed. Stella was rushed into surgery for her lung transplant, while Will waited anxiously outside, knowing that his one act to save her may have doomed her future. Stella's surgery began, and time seemed to freeze. Will waited outside the operating room, consumed by guilt and fear. Hours later, the doctors finally came out. Against all odds, the transplant was a success. Stella did not contract Will's bacteria. Her new lungs were working, and for the first time, Will felt a wave of relief crash over him, but it was short-lived. His own condition hadn't improved. The drug trial he had been part of was failing. Will realized a painful truth. Staying near Stella would eventually kill her, no matter how careful he was. Will made the hardest decision of his life. He decided to leave. Before going, Will arranged a final goodbye. He organized a massive display of lights outside Stella's recovery room. This fulfilled Stella's long-held wish to see the city lights up close. They played her a video of Will. He told her that his only regret was that she didn't get to see her lights. Then, standing on the other side of the glass, Will lit them up. Stella watched in awe as the lights glowed against the glass walls. Too risky to be in the same room with her, Will stood on the other side of the glass. He spoke to her through a phone, separated by a barrier that symbolized everything they could never cross. Will told Stella how deeply he loved her. He asked her to close her eyes so she didn't have to watch him walk away. She did, holding onto the sound of his voice for as long as she could as tears streamed down her face. When she opened her eyes again, Will was gone. All that remained was his sketchbook, filled with drawings, memories, and a final goodbye. The movie ended with Stella recording a new YouTube video. Her final message: "We need that touch from the one we love almost as much as we need air to breathe. I never understood the importance of touch, his touch, until I couldn't have it. So if you're watching this and you're able, touch him, touch her. Life's too short to waste a second." Friends, if this story stayed with you, rule number 1 recaps is where we tell them.